little while ago, I came across a lyric written by my friend Leonard Cohen. It's in a song, and he's trying to describe intense desolation, the kind of feeling we get when your father or your dog just died. And I remember how struck I was by that. I grew up with pets, but then I came across a statistic recently which indicated that more people admitted to loving their pets than loving their spouse. I think that's telling too. So I thought I'd invite Stanley Coren. Stanley has been with us at Idea City and is now welcome to the CARP conference stage. I thought it was also telling when Dr. Goldberg put up that charming picture of himself and his dog. It reminded me that Stanley was going to come and talk to us this afternoon. Stanley Coren.
Hi there. I don't know whether I can give the talk, because I was going to give you the secret of happiness, but Dr. Lombardo has already done that. But I will give you a hint that it's got 4 paws and a tail. One of the things which you have to understand is that human beings were not designed for our particular way of life. And basically, what we are doing is we are blundering around the world with a nervous system and an immune system which worked perfectly well when we were Neanderthals, but was not designed for our current society. The reason it worked when you were a Neanderthal is because when you were stressed, it was usually because, something was going to eat you or that sort of thing. And so either you fought it off or you ran away, and at that point in time, the stress drops because you're no longer under threat. During the time when you're being stressed, a whole lot of things happen. Your heartbeat speeds up, you breathe more quickly, you get all sorts of special hormones which get dumped into your bloodstream, and your immune system sort of revs up. The big problem is that we're no longer being attacked by saber-toothed tigers. Oh, well, that's not a big problem, okay? I mean, it's a nice thing, okay? But we still have stresses. The big difference is that our stresses now are of long duration. So we're worried about the economy, and we're worried about the government, we're worried about our marital relationship, we're worried about the fact that our kid is going off to college and is probably doing drugs or whatever else, okay? And so what happens here is that Neanderthal nervous system and immune system revs up. And when it does so, it starts to do really bad things to you. We can show, for example, that one of my favorite studies of this sort was run in Australia, really big study, involved 73,000 people. And they looked at individuals and determined the likelihood that they would have heart problems. And they were very careful to make sure that at least half of their samples were living poor lifestyles. They smoked too much, they drank, they didn't exercise, or that sort of thing. And basically they found that stress was the best predictor of whether or not they were going to have heart problems. And even in the low stress groups, okay, that's women who don't smoke or drink and who do exercise, individuals who are under stress were twice as likely to have heart problems. So, now we come to our problem. As we get older, most of us have a ratcheting up of our stress. Why? Because we're now on our pension income instead of our other income. Now our kids are old enough so that they're having real life interactions and are producing stressors. And of course our bodies, the knee goes out, the hip goes out, you're not sleeping as well and that sort of thing. So we now have this high level of stress, and what do we do about it? Well, one of the things which we can do is we can take a pill, Prozac and all of its derivatives. Big problem with that. It takes about a month to 6 weeks before the effects cut in. And then all you have to do is to miss 3 doses of it, and you're back to ground zero, and you got to start all over. But there is a solution. And it goes woof. Back in the 1980s, a psychiatrist by the name of Aaron Katcher and a psychologist by the name of Alan Beck ran a study which blew us all away. We all knew that, when times are hard and that sort of thing, you call Lassie over, you pudgy her a little bit and say, oh, what a dog. And what happens? You feel better. And what Alan and Aaron did was they wired up people to measure their physiological responses. And they found that when you petted a friendly dog, your heartbeat slowed, your breathing became more regular, your muscles untensed. Since that time, people have repeated the study with a whole bunch of variations, and they basically have also noticed that the stress hormones, the cortisols, for example, which are in your blood, all tend to go down when you're petting a dog. And furthermore, the so-called love hormone, oxytocin, which you get when you are around your kids and touching them or fondling your loved one or that sort of thing, tends to also go up when you are petting a dog. The neat thing about this, these are clearly the signs of reduced stress. The neat thing about this is that the effects will take place between 2 minutes and 24 minutes after you start to pet the dog. And they last. An average dose of this will last you about 16 to 18 hours. Now, this has long-term effects. We just said to you, if you're highly stressed, then you're much more likely to have heart problems and that sort of thing. And in fact, there are a whole number of studies which suggest that if you have a dog, some of these stress-related illnesses are greatly reduced. For example, a very clever gal by the name of Elaine Friedman at the University of Pennsylvania ran a series of studies. Basically, she was looking at individuals, men, who were between 55 and 65 years of age, and they just had their first heart attack. And what she did is she then followed them, depending upon the study, for 1 to 4 years, and found that those who owned a pet were much more likely to be alive at the end of the test period than those who didn't. Do you notice a little subtle shift which we had over there? Those who owned a pet. We've been talking about dogs up to now. Well, in fact, it is the case that if you own a cat, it does have some beneficial effect, but only half the effect of a dog. Right? And the trick here seems to be the degree of social interaction. Okay? Dogs are much more socially interactive than cats are, and are much more likely to pay attention to you. You remember most of you have probably heard Mark Twain's comment, which is, if you take a dog and you save him from impoverishment and you feed him and care for him, he thinks you're God. If you take a cat and you save him from impoverishment and feed him and care for him, the cat thinks that he's God. Now, one of the neat things is that psychologists have been extending these kinds of findings into the psychological realm, the realm of psychological fitness, as well as these sort of basic stress reduction kinds of studies. And the results have been absolutely remarkable. For example, a series of studies have looked at seniors in particular. The first thing which they note is that seniors who own a dog use the medical services much less. One survey which was conducted in Australia estimated that pet ownership was saving their socialized medicine system over $450 million a year because, in fact, the owners of dogs were going to the doctor 2 to 3 times less every year than the non-owners. Another major problem which we have is depression. Depression is a huge problem in seniors, especially in seniors who are now living alone, whose family is sort of scattered or whose spouse has died and that sort of thing. And seniors are one of the major targets of depression. But seniors who own a pet, who own a dog in this case, are only 1/4 as likely to develop clinical levels of depression. It's also the case that, remember I said that the difference between the dog and the cat was their social interaction. That social interaction which you have with the dog really seems to facilitate the quality of life for seniors. It tends to serve as a buffer because, sometimes, you creak around and you're a little bit older and you get the impression that nobody really pays much attention to you. But, Lassie's always there to pay attention to you. A really cute study looked at couples, and some who had dogs and some who did not, and found that the divorce rate was lower in the couples who had dogs. And according to the authors of this study, the reason is, you've had an absolutely crappy day at work, you come home, and you really need some TLC, and there's your partner, okay? And they've had an absolutely rotten day, and if you demand some affection, what happens? It starts a fight, and the cumulative stress level in your household goes up, right? But what really happens when you walk into the house if you've got a dog? Well, Lassie greets you at the door, right? So you go, "Hi, Lassie, what are you doing?" Oops, there goes all that sort of nice muscle relaxation, lowered stress. Now you don't need the TLC, right? So you don't make the demands on your partner, and in fact, the overall stress level of your marriage does not rise. Now, of course, some of you who have a more scientific bent are probably going to say, yeah, well, that's just sort of a correlation, just some kind of an association. Maybe it's the people who are healthier in the first place who feel that they, can keep the dog, and the ones who are already depressed and not so healthy say, "I can't have a dog, I can't manage it." Well, in fact, there have been a couple of studies which have addressed that. In one of them, what they did was they took stockbrokers, a whole bunch of stockbrokers who were already showing signs of hypertension. They had elevated blood pressure levels. They took this group and split it. Both groups were given exactly the same blood pressure control medication, and one group was asked to get a dog. They then brought them back 6 months later. The first thing which they found is that the group which went out and had the dog had lower resting blood pressure levels. But they were looking for more than that. So what they did was they then took the stockbrokers and they brought them into a situation where they had to role play a situation, a very uncomfortable situation involving an error, a crisis, or something like that. And we know what happens under these circumstances. People get into the role, they're play acting, yes, but they get the same stress as though it was the real thing. So their blood pressure starts to go up. So they measured their blood pressure going up under these circumstances. Then for those individuals who had a dog, for the individual who had a dog, however, they were allowed to have the dog in the room with them. And when that happened, in fact, the individuals who had the dog had only approximately half the rise in blood pressure that the individuals who didn't. An interesting other fact is they also ran another condition in which they had individuals bring their spouse in. And the dog was better at holding down the blood pressure level than was the spouse in these particular situations. One of the reasons why these are important findings is because we also find that, particularly in socially isolated seniors, a dog is also a bridge to social interactions. People are much more likely to talk to an individual who they don't know if the individual has a dog, because there's also the dog there to play with. And in fact, we get all sorts of reports from people that the best way to renew a romantic relationship, if you've been living by yourself, is to go out and get a dog. And then to go out and walk with the other dog walkers, and you end up talking about the dog, and you go out and have coffee, and who knows, one thing leads to another. So, what does this mean? Well, at one level, it means that maybe we should be railing against those senior accommodation units which don't permit the keeping of pets, because it certainly seems as though there's some psychological and physiological benefits. But it also means that at some time in the future, when you're feeling depressed or achy or just out of sorts or that sort of thing, and you call your doctor, his advice is apt to be, pat 2 puppies and call me in the morning. Thank you all.
Stanley, those are fighting words about cats, though. Holy cow. How did the room divide on that? Serious stuff. Thank you very much.